Hi, Pete Wadgen here from Next Level Wealth, a pretty hot and sticky time of year up here in Queensland. Now, I was reading in the paper today about Brisbane's $27 million suburbs, and I was temporarily excited to see new farms shooting up the list, only to have that tempered when I saw that Tenerife had its median price going backwards. Now, Tenerife allegedly saw its median house price rising by about $1 million over the preceding couple of years, which just goes to show the limitations of median prices at the suburb level, because those numbers might be derived from a sample of, say, 15 or 20 sales, and therefore from year to year the numbers can be all over the place. Now, coincidentally, for something different, I was researching long-term price growth across a whole range of Brisbane suburbs today. And a couple of interesting things jumped out. One was an outlier, the suburb of Wilston, which over 25 years had seen remarkably strong growth, I think partly driven by some one-off windfall gains where homeowners had sold their housing for medium density dwelling. So those are one-off gains that won't be repeated. But only to read in the paper today that apparently the median house price had fallen by 22% again over the past year. So it just goes to show at the suburb level to take some of those figures with a pinch of salt. So I think if you're researching property prices with a view to buying, there are a few things to think about, and here are three. Number one is that you don't buy a city or even a suburb, you buy an individual property. Because even at the suburb level, prices can be skewed all over the place by major renovations, home improvements, not to mention flood zones and main roads and so on. Second thing to think about is that there are actually two components to a property price. Firstly, there's the land value, sometimes known as the unimproved site value for tax purposes. And the second part is the building or the structure itself. Now, over the long run, it's by and large, it's the land value that does most of the heavy lifting for you in terms of capital growth. So ideally, you want the land value component of any purchase to be at least 50% of the purchase price. And then the third thing to think about is that while you're looking for properties with capital growth potential, so ideally family appropriate, good school zones, well connected, that sort of thing, you also want the cash flow to be manageable over the life of the asset. Doesn't matter if you're a home buyer or an investor, that holds true. Now, for investors, a couple of additional things to think about. Number one is for people that buy in a trust to understand the land tax thresholds, because they are different for individuals and trusts in Queensland. And a second thing to think about, particularly since the changes in 2017, is depreciation, because if you get that right, it can make an enormous difference for investors to the after-tax cash flow. So those are just three things to think about. Number one, you buy a property, not a suburb or a city. Number two, remember that it's the land value that does most of the heavy lifting for you over the long run. And the third thing to think about is, yes, seek capital growth potential, because that is how wealth is created, but also have a view to manageable cash flows, because that's what keeps you in the game. Cheers.